My wife secretly stole $250, $0 from our joint account, pawned my family heirlooms worth $100, $0, and now she's claiming I signed a fraudulent property deed. Turns out she's been planning to kick me out and keep everything after a year of hidden affairs. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. Honestly, it feels like I've stepped into some twisted nightmare where everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. Just a few weeks ago, I'd have told you I had the perfect life with my wife, Emily. We were married for 8 years, had a beautiful house, and I thought we were solid. But then I started noticing little things, her phone vibrating nonstop, late nights at work, odd messages she'd quickly hide when I came into the room. Nothing obvious, but enough to make me suspicious. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was just stressed. Or maybe she had some new friends at her job, but deep down I knew something was off. Then I found the first real clue. I was going through some papers in our bedroom looking for a document I'd misplaced, and I saw her phone lying face down on the dresser. Something made me pick it up. I wasn't snooping. Well, maybe a little, just curious. What I saw made my stomach turn. There were messages, flirty and suggestive, between her and some guy named Jake from her office. They were talking about secrets, late nights, and even more explicit stuff. I felt my blood run cold. My wife, Emily, who always acted like she was above all that kind of trash, was secretly cheating on me with some guy she'd met at work. That was just the start. I decided to dig a little deeper. I checked her emails, her social media accounts, anything I could get my hands on without her suspecting. And what I found was even worse. She'd been lying about her whereabouts, claiming she was at work, but her calendar was full of meetings and dinners with Jake. I could see their plans to meet outside. Of work dates I never knew about. Even worse, I found out she'd been sneaking around for almost a year. The emotional punch came when I looked at our bank statements. I didn't expect much, just wanted to see if she'd bought anything expensive lately. Instead, I saw a transfer of $250, $0 from our joint account to an unknown account. That's when I realized she'd been stealing money. I couldn't believe it. That's $250,000. How the hell do you steal that much from your own family? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I wanted to scream, cry, break something. I couldn't even process how she pulled it off without me noticing. And then came the worst part. I remembered her talking about her family heirlooms, jewelry, silverware, old paintings, things of real value. I checked the pawn shop receipts she'd kept hidden in her drawer. Turns out she'd pawned my great-grandfather's silver set, worth around $100, $0. She lied about everything, about her job, about her whereabouts, about the money, and about the heirlooms. All of it was a lie. I confronted her that night. I could barely speak, my voice trembling. I told her I knew everything about the affair, the stolen money, the pawned heirlooms. She looked me straight in the eyes and lied through her teeth. Said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that Jake was just a coworker she was helping with a project. She called me crazy, said I was overreacting. But I saw her panic, her guilt. She was lying, I knew it. That moment changed everything. I'd always thought I knew her, but now I realized she'd been planning this for a long time. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't breathe. I felt numb, furious, heartbroken. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. I wondered what her real reason was. Was it just about the money? Or was she bored, angry, looking for some thrill? I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that the woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I promised myself I wouldn't let her get away with this. I had to figure out what to do, how to fight back against someone who was so manipulative and deceitful. But honestly, I was lost. My mind was racing, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way back. I didn't sleep that night, just stared at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd uncovered. The trust was shattered, and I knew I couldn't stay quiet much longer. Something had to change. Would you like me to continue with the next part? The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw her differently. Her smile, her touch, the way she used to look at me with love. Now all I saw was a stranger hiding 1,000 secrets. I knew I had to confront her again, but I wasn't sure what I was going to say or do. My mind kept circling back to the money, the heirlooms, and the affair. How deep did this go? Was she planning to just take everything and run? I couldn't let that happen. I needed a plan, and I needed to be smart about it. One afternoon, I decided to follow her. I told her I was going out to meet a friend, but instead, I parked a block away from her office building. I watched her come out just after 5 p.m., smiling, talking on her phone, heading toward a parking lot. She got into her car and I followed at a distance. She drove to a small, secluded house on the outskirts of town. I didn't recognize it, but what I saw when she got inside confirmed my suspicions. She was meeting Jake again. I saw them through the window, her leaning into him, laughing, touching his arm. This was real. That night I couldn't sleep. I was boiling with rage, heartbreak, and confusion. I knew I had to do something, but what? I couldn't just storm into her place and accuse her of everything. That would blow up in my face. I needed proof, something undeniable, so I devised a plan. I would get a private investigator. I needed to know everything about her, her money, her plans. I wanted to catch her in the act if I could, or at least have enough evidence to confront her with facts. While I was setting this up, Emily's attitude started to shift. She became more bitchy, more defensive. She accused me of spying on her, called me paranoid, and said I was losing my mind. She played the victim, crying about how I didn't trust her, how I was ruining our marriage. But I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me anymore. I stayed quiet, biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the meantime, I dug into our finances more. I found out she opened new accounts in my name, forged signatures on some property deeds, things I never authorized. She was planning to kick me out, I realized. She wanted everything, our house, the money, the heirlooms, and she was doing everything secretly. She even claimed I signed a fraudulent property deed, trying to make me look like I was trying to steal from her. But I had the proof now that she'd forged my signature on that deed. It all hit me like a freight train. This woman was a master manipulator. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe longer. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I had invested so much in this marriage, in her. And now I saw she'd been lying, cheating, stealing from me right under my nose. I decided I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to act fast. I contacted the investigator and he confirmed everything I suspected, her meetings, her accounts, her plans. That's when I made my move. I sat her down one evening, prepared to confront her with everything. I told her I had all the evidence, that I knew about the affair, the money, the forged documents. Her face twisted into a snarl, and she started lying again, saying I was crazy, that I was paranoid, that I was just jealous. She called me names, told me I was insecure, that she had every right to see other people because I wasn't satisfying her anymore. It was like I was talking to a stranger who just happened to be my wife. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. The woman I thought I loved, the woman I married, was a con artist. She was a manipulative, selfish bitch who'd been planning her escape for a long time. I was furious, but I also felt a deep sadness, like I'd lost someone I thought was my partner. I couldn't understand how someone could be so heartless, so willing to destroy everything we built. I asked her directly, was this all about money, about revenge, or just her own selfish thrill? She just sneered and said she was tired of my controlling bullshit and that she deserved better. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying everything, her lies, her betrayal, the stolen money, the heirlooms pawned, the forged documents. I felt betrayed on every level. But I also knew I couldn't let her keep doing this. I had to take control of the situation, protect what was left of my life, and figure out my next move. The thought of losing everything, my house, my savings, my dignity, was unbearable. But what hurt the most was knowing that the woman I loved was capable of all this deception. It made me question everything, even myself. Would you like me to continue with the next part? After that confrontation, I knew I had to act quickly. Emily's attitude only got worse, more defiant, more dismissive. She was still denying everything, spinning her stories about how I was crazy or jealous, trying to turn the tables and make me look paranoid. But I had the evidence now, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me anymore. I decided the best course of action was to bring in professionals, lawyers, investigators, and even a financial advisor, to get everything documented and properly handled. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in divorce and financial fraud. We sat down, and I laid out everything I'd uncovered. The stolen $250, $0, the pawned heirlooms, the forged property deed, her secret meetings with Jake. My lawyer confirmed that I had a solid case for legal action. She also advised me on how to protect my remaining assets and how to proceed with the divorce if it came to that. I felt a weight lift knowing I was finally taking control of the situation, even if it was painful. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Emily. I needed to know if she was planning to run, hide, or do anything else to cover her tracks. Over the next week, he sent me reports. She was still sneaking around, still meeting Jake, still trying to access our bank accounts. I found out she'd been trying to transfer more money, possibly to cover her tracks or prepare for a quick escape. It was clear she was trying to get ahead of everything, too. Leave me with nothing. The emotional toll was brutal. Every day felt like a roller coaster: anger, sadness, frustration, and a deep sense of betrayal. I felt like I was living in someone else's nightmare. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. I thought about all the times I'd trusted her, all the vacations, the quiet nights at home, the plans we'd made. It was all a lie. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, and I was just a pawn in her game. One particular night, she came home late again, smelling like perfume and alcohol. She was bitchy, dismissive, and refused to answer my questions directly. I confronted her, demanding the truth. She finally snapped, telling me I was crazy for suspecting her, that I was just insecure. Then she threw in some classic gaslighting. "You're just jealous because I'm better looking than your boring ass." I felt my blood boil. This woman, who I thought loved me, was just a manipulative, selfish bitch. I decided I couldn't take her lies anymore. I needed her out of the house, and I needed her to face the consequences of what she'd done. I started gathering all the evidence, screenshots, bank records, pawn slips, everything, to prepare for a legal showdown. I also made plans to find a new place to live, just in case she tried to kick me out or disappear. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. At the same time, I kept asking myself what I'd learned from all this. How could someone I loved turn into this person? How did I miss the signs? And most importantly, how do I move forward from here? The trust was shattered, and I knew I'd never see her the same way again. But I also realized I had a choice. I could let this destroy me or use it as a wake-up call. I chose the latter. I decided I'd fight for what's left: my dignity, my money, my peace of mind. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the documents and evidence spread out on the table. My heart was heavy, but a small part of me felt a strange sense of relief. I'd uncovered the truth, and now I could finally do something about it. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was no longer willing to be a victim of her schemes. I was going to stand up and take control. Would you like me to continue with the next part? The days that followed were a whirlwind. I had everything I needed now: proof of her betrayal, her financial schemes, her plans to leave me with nothing. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief because I finally had the upper hand, and anger because I'd been so blind for so long. I knew I had to act fast, so I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to lay out my next steps. We discussed filing for divorce, recovering what was stolen, and protecting what was left of my assets. The lawyer warned me that Emily might try to fight dirty, maybe even accuse me of things I didn't do, so I had to be prepared. Meanwhile, I started to plan my exit strategy. I found a small apartment nearby, something affordable, just in case she decided to kick me out or I had to leave suddenly. I also arranged for a financial advisor to help me sort through what was left, to make sure I could rebuild from this mess. The whole time my mind kept circling back to her. How could she do this? How could she lie, cheat, steal, all while pretending to be the perfect wife? It was like waking up from a nightmare every morning. One afternoon, I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with the evidence in hand. I called her at work, told her I wanted to meet. She was hesitant, but I told her it was about our future and that I had some things to discuss. When she showed up that evening, she was still acting bitchy, trying to brush off my questions. I laid out everything, her affair, the stolen money, the pawned heirlooms, the forged documents. Her face twisted into a mixture of shock and anger. She tried to deny everything, claiming I was making it all up, that I was paranoid. That was the moment I saw her true colors. She started crying, acting all innocent, saying I was ruining her life, that I was the one who was crazy. But I had the receipts, the bank statements, the texts. There was no denying it anymore. I told her I was done, that I was filing for divorce, and that I'd take everything she tried to steal from me. Her bitchy attitude turned into outright rage. She yelled at me, calling me jealous, insecure, and even worse. She said she'd ruin me if I tried to take her to court. Honestly, I felt a mixture of disgust and pity. I realized I'd been married to a manipulative, selfish person who was only out for herself. My heart was broken, but I knew I had to be strong. I told her I was done playing her game and that I'd see her in court. I left that night feeling a strange sense of clarity, knowing I had taken the first real step toward justice. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about everything: her lies, her betrayal, the money she stole, the heirlooms pawned, the forged property deed. I felt betrayed on every level, but I also knew I couldn't let her keep doing this. I had to take control of the situation, protect what was left of my life, and figure out my next move. The thought of losing everything, my house, my savings, my dignity, was unbearable. But what hurt the most was knowing that the woman I loved was capable of all this deception. It made me question everything, even myself. I decided I wouldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I was done being the victim. I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I knew this was just the beginning, that she'd try to spin more lies or come back with some new scheme. But I was prepared. I had my lawyer, my evidence, and a resolve I'd never felt before. As I sat in my new apartment that night, I thought about everything I'd learned, about trust, betrayal, greed, and resilience. I realized that I'd spent so much time caring for her, loving her, believing in us, that I'd almost lost myself. But now I was reclaiming my life. I knew this process wouldn't be easy, and the emotional scars would take time to heal. But I also knew I was stronger than I thought. I'd get through this, rebuild, and come out the other side. Would you like me to continue with the next part? The legal process moved faster than I expected, probably because I was determined to get to the truth and put an end to her manipulation. My lawyer filed for divorce, citing her infidelity, financial fraud, and breach of trust. We also included a detailed list of all the stolen assets, money transferred to unknown accounts, heirlooms pawned, forged property deeds, and demanded their return or compensation. Emily, predictably, fought back hard. She hired her own lawyer, and suddenly the whole thing turned into a battle. She started playing the victim, claiming I was abusive, controlling, and trying to ruin her reputation. The court hearings were intense. Emily's lawyer tried to spin her as the victim, claiming she was just confused and misguided, but I had the evidence. I brought in the bank statements, the pawn shop receipts, the investigators' reports. I presented everything, and the judge listened carefully. It was clear Emily had been planning her escape for months. She forged signatures, transferred money, pawned family heirlooms, all behind my back. She even tried to claim I signed documents I never saw, but we had proof of her forging my signature. The emotional toll was brutal during this period. Every day was a roller coaster of rage, sadness, and relief. I hated her for everything she'd done, but I also felt devastated for what I'd lost. The woman I thought was my partner, the mother of my children, was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Still, I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for any chance at justice. I kept reminding myself that I was doing this not just to fight for my money or my house, but to reclaim my dignity. One night, after a particularly grueling court session, I sat alone in my new apartment, exhausted and emotionally drained. I looked at all the evidence I had compiled and realized how much I'd been through. The betrayal, the lies, the theft, it was all a lot to process, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd finally taken control of my life again. I'd fought back against her manipulations and I was winning. I knew the road ahead would still have hurdles, but I was ready. Then, unexpectedly, Emily showed up at my new place. She was crying, begging, saying she was sorry. She claimed she'd made terrible mistakes, that she loved me and wanted to fix everything. But I saw right through her. She was trying to manipulate me again, playing on my emotions. I told her I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I had all the proof I needed and I wasn't going to fall for her tricks. I made it clear that I was done, that she'd burned her bridges. The next few weeks were tense. The court hearings continued and I stayed firm. I also started the process of reclaiming what was rightfully mine: my money, my property, my peace of mind. I worked with the financial advisor to secure my remaining assets and to plan for rebuilding my life. I also took some time to reflect on what I'd learned. Trust is fragile, and sometimes people hide their true selves behind a mask. I realized I'd been blind for too long, but now I was finally awake. In the end, the judge awarded me most of the stolen money, ordered Emily to return the heirlooms, and declared the property deed invalid because of her forgery. It wasn't a perfect ending, nothing ever is, but it felt like justice. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I'd fought for myself and won. The betrayal still stung, but I knew I'd come out stronger. I had learned the importance of being vigilant, trusting my instincts, and never ignoring the signs of trouble. Now I'm slowly rebuilding my life. I've moved into a new place, started seeing a therapist to deal with the fallout, and I'm focusing on the future. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust again, but I do know I won't let anyone manipulate me like that again. My advice to anyone going through something similar: trust your gut, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. The truth might be painful, but it's always better than living in a lie. Would you like me to continue with the final part? Looking back now, I can't believe how much my life has changed in such a short time. I thought I knew everything about my marriage, about Emily, but I was dead wrong. The betrayal ran deep: money, lies, affairs, forged documents. It was like peeling back layers of a rotten onion, each revelation more painful than the last. But somehow, I managed to claw my way out of that mess, and I learned some hard truths along the way. The biggest one being that trusting blindly isn't a virtue, it's a risk. I've come to understand that people can hide their true selves behind a pretty facade, and sometimes the ones closest to you are the ones capable of the worst betrayal. I don't regret loving Emily, but I do regret ignoring the signs for so long. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: pay attention to the red flags. Don't brush off your gut feelings. If something feels wrong, dig deeper. Because once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to repair. As for me, I'm in a better place now. I've started to rebuild, financially, emotionally, mentally. I've learned to be cautious, to verify everything, and most importantly, to value myself more. I realize I was giving too much, trusting too easily, and ignoring my own needs. That's a mistake I won't make again. I've also learned that revenge, while satisfying temporarily, doesn't bring peace. It only adds to the chaos. What truly matters is reclaiming your life and finding peace within yourself. Now I focus on the future. I've cut out the toxic people, including Emily. I've started therapy to process what happened and to heal from the deep wounds of betrayal. I'm slowly reconnecting with friends and family, people who genuinely care. I want to be a better man, more cautious, more aware, but also more resilient. This experience has made me realize how precious honesty and integrity are. I don't want to live in fear or suspicion, but I do want to be smarter about who I trust. To anyone going through similar heartbreak, I want you to know you're not alone. It's okay to feel broken, to feel angry, to feel lost. But don't let that define you. Use it as fuel to rebuild, to grow stronger, to learn. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy, but you can rebuild it first in yourself. Take control of your life, get the proof you need, and fight for what's rightfully yours. Because no matter how deep the betrayal, you still have the power to choose your next chapter. Today I stand here, a little wiser, a little more cautious, but also hopeful. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us the most. But that pain doesn't have to break us. It can teach us resilience, strength, and the value of honesty. I've learned that the hard way, and I wouldn't trade that lesson for anything. I'm moving forward, leaving the past behind and focusing on the kind of life I deserve, one built on truth, respect, and trust. And that's what I want anyone reading this to remember. Never settle for less. Never ignore the signs. And most importantly, never forget your worth. Because in the end, the only person who truly has your back is yourself.